All right, welcome everyone, and thanks for joining the APT and Cybersecurity LinkedIn Live event, CISO 2030, looking through the next cyber frontier. I'm Aaron Stillwell, joined by my co-host, Alex Mavro. We're honored to have Dr. Eric Cole with us, former CIA hacker, long-term practitioner, and advisor to Fortune 50 organizations, author and CEO of Secure Anchor, to help us explore what it takes to lead cybersecurity into 2030. Today, we will walk through several focused topics, including CISO's role in 2030, AI, zero trust, ransomware, supply chain, incident response, and talent. Please drop your questions in the LinkedIn comments throughout this session, and we will do our best to answer them in the end. Eric, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. I'm super excited.
Awesome. So let's do into kind of our first topic, the CISO role in 2030. Over the past 5 years, how has the CISO's role evolved, and what do you believe it will look like by 2030?
So to me, the big thing that we have to really remember about the CISO role is the outer letters. What I mean by that is if we look CISO, so many CISOs in the past have focused on information security. And a lot of times they're way too technical and way too tactical. To me, it's chief officers. We have to think, act, and behave like a chief officer, which means we have to focus more strategic and really talk about the business. What is the business? What is the revenue? What is the profit margins? And to me, world-class CISOs today and in the next 5 years are really just focused on four things. What could happen, the likelihood of it happening, the cost if it occurs, and the cost to fix it. Because that's really all executives care about is what is the impact to the business from a financial standpoint. And we have to remember that if cybersecurity negatively impacts the business, it's wrong. It's all about growing the business. So to me, over the next 5 years, world-class CISOs are all about making cybersecurity a business enabler. How do we enable and help the business to grow? How do we go in and put it in a way that it helps revenue and profit? And to me, our role as a CISO is not to get our way. One of the things that I live my life on as being a vCISO is let data drive decisions, not emotional. I think a lot of times security professionals, we get too emotional. We go into the board going, we must fix this problem. We must get the 300K. And if the board says no, we're angry and pissed and upset. And the reality is our job is to be honest brokers. When I go in and brief the executive board, I go in and give them two options. You can either accept this risk of, let's say, 70% of occurring and it costs you $2 million, or you can spend 300K and reduce the risk to an acceptable level. As long as you fully understand those decisions, I don't care which one you do, because sometimes business, you have to accept risk. Sometimes in business, you have to go in and say, we're going to accept this risk to occur. And I'm okay with that. We just have to be honest brokers instead of trying to force or push an emotional decision.
Yeah, true. Over there.
So what three capabilities will separate the most effective CISOs in 2030 from the rest, do you think?
The first one is really understanding what cybersecurity is. I know it sounds crazy, but I give these presentations and I talk to people who have worked in security for 10 years and executives, and I ask them a simple question. Give me a one-sentence definition of cybersecurity. And the scary part is most people can't. I just had dinner with somebody who's a world-class forensic expert. They've been doing forensics for 17 years. And I'm like, give me a one-sentence concise definition of cybersecurity. And like, well, Eric, you sort of know what it is. And I'm like, no, give me the definition. And most people can't. And even when I ask executives and CEOs, what is cybersecurity? It's like, well, you know, it's hackers. Well, you know, it's all about stopping breaches. Or my favorite one, and this was the CEO of a top oil company in the world. When I said, what is the definition of cybersecurity? He's like, you're the people that make my life difficult. And I'm like, okay, I don't like it. But, I mean, and that
so you're saying I'm not enabling business then?
Exactly. So I need to make your life. So here's what it comes down to. Cybersecurity, real simple. It's about understanding, managing, and mitigating risk of your critical assets being disclosed, altered, or denied access. So world-class CISOs, the first skill is they have to understand and manage risk and come up with what is the risk posture for the organization. Because the reality is CEOs, COOs accept risk all the time. They accept business risk. And we need to realize cybersecurity is understanding risk. So the first question is, what is your risk tolerance? What is your acceptable level of risk for the organization?
Yeah.
And world-class CISOs are going to get everyone in the organization to agree to that. Because the reality today, most organizations, when it comes to cybersecurity, they accept zero risk. If a breach happens, security failed. How do I know? What is the number one thing that happens when a breach occurs? The CISO gets fired.
Yeah, true.
That means the organization has zero tolerance for risk. We have to embrace the breach and embrace the fact it's going to happen. So the second skill is we have to educate our executives that 100% security doesn't exist. It's not a reality. You have to accept some risk. You're going to have a 70% risk acceptance in the organization and embrace the breach. Breaches are going to happen, and you have to recognize and accept that that's going to occur. The next thing is, and we talked about this before the show, what's your critical assets? What are your critical assets? Where are they located? And what is the area you're protecting when it comes to confidentiality, integrity, and availability? And we have to go in and come up with redundancy plan. I mean, we saw 3 weeks ago when AWS went down and so many companies were ill-prepared.
Yeah.
You saw so many major companies lose access to their data for 12 hours because they didn't really know where their critical data was, and they didn't have a risk tolerance to accept that. Yes, Amazon shouldn't go down. Clearly, there's a bigger problem there, but you shouldn't have all of your eggs in one basket, that if Amazon goes down, you lose your business.
Oh, yeah.
You lose access to your business and you lose access to your revenue. So it's really stepping back and embracing those key areas of cybersecurity: risk tolerance, having an acceptable level of risk, embracing the breach, knowing where your critical data is, and having backup and redundancy planning in place, and then really just thinking like a chief officer, where you need to know how to read balance sheets. You need to know how to read profit and loss statements. You need to go in and constantly be looking at the financials of the company, because the question is this: is $1 million an acceptable budget? Well, it depends. If your company is making 700K revenue, $1 million is ridiculous. You're maybe going to have 50K. But if you're making, like when I worked at Lockheed Martin, where they're making billions upon billions of dollars, and I went to the CEO and asked for $1 million security budget, they would have laughed me out of the room, because 20 or 30 million is much more appropriate. So we got to go in and not just go in and accept the budgets. We need to understand what the revenue is and what business units generate what revenue, so we can actually focus our energy correctly.
Actually, is there a certain percentage that you look at of the revenue of the company that when you're asking for the budget?
Usually today, it's going to be somewhere about 2 to 3%. I find is usually about the norm. Now, if it's the company's doing really bad and they've ignored security for so long, maybe it's 4 or 5%. But I find usually that's the sweet spot. And the other important thing is we have to switch the model. Right now, today, in so many organizations, the CISO reports to the CIO. That's a broken model, because the CIO is 1/3 of cybersecurity.
Oh, yeah.
Remember our definition: understand, managing, and mitigate the risk of our critical data being disclosed, altered, or denied access. A denied access is availability. That's what the CIO does. The CIO is obsessed with uptime availability.
Yeah.
99.99% upside availability. Well, guess what? If you report to the CIO, then confidentiality and integrity are taking a second seat. Because if you go in and propose something that's going to protect your data from a confidentiality or integrity, but it impacts the availability, the CIO is never going to do it. So security gets buried. The CIO needs to report to the CISO. The CISO should be the one top 5. So in any organization, when you look at your top 5 chief officers, it should be the CEO, the CFO, the COO, chief legal counsel, and CISO. And then under the CISO is where the risk manager should report to the CISO. The data officer should report to the CISO. The CIO should report to the CISO. So we got to go in and revamp the organization so it's done in a logical way, as opposed to right now where cybersecurity is buried and the executives are just not getting the information that they need.
I have a question. in some cases, in the past companies where I worked, the CRO was the one upper level than CISO. Do you think it's good like that? I mean, the risk officer should be the first and not the CISO?
So it depends on how you're defining. If the risk officer is going in and focusing just on one subset of risk and not confidentiality, integrity, availability, then to me, it should almost be the opposite, because risk is a subcomponent of cybersecurity.
Yeah, I agree on that.
It's not the only. So if the risk officer is just focusing on the risk and not critical data, and not confidentiality, integrity, availability, then they're missing that key component. So yeah, I actually think the risk officer should report to the CISO so they have full visibility into what's happening and what's occurring.
Okay, thank you.
So I do have a question. Can you share an example, kind of a proactive conversation a CISO should be having with their board today to prepare for 2030?
So the conversation is back to those four areas. What could happen? What is the likelihood of occurring, cost of it occurs, and cost to fix it? So when you brief the board, I use 3 slides. That's it.
Yeah.
And what happens is I see these CISOs going in to brief the board, and they have a 40 slide deck.
Wow.
Where they're getting into false positives, false negatives, DLPs, and
way too technical.
Way too technical, and it goes way over. So the conversation I have with my boards is this: what are the current threats to our business?
Right.
Not all businesses, but our specific business. What are the top threats that could occur? Ransomware, outages, integrity, modifications to our critical data. And then the second slide is, what are the unique vulnerabilities that exist in our company? What are specific vulnerabilities? Is it our endpoints are too exposed? Is it our data is not properly protected or secured? Is our systems outdated and vulnerable? And then the third slide is, what are the top 5 risks? So what could happen? So today, what could our data be held ransom? Could our data be extorted and put out on the web? Could our systems go down like Amazon went down because we don't know what our critical information is? Then what is the likelihood of this occurring? What is the real chance of us being hit with ransomware? Is it 10%? Is it 80%? Is it 90%? And then what is the real cost? If we get hit with ransomware today, what is going to be the ransom payment? Are they going to demand 300K, 2 million, 5 million? What is the true financial impact of this happening? And what is the cost to fix it? What would it really cost us to stop this from happening? And then you look at the board and go, what would you like us to do? Would you like us to accept this risk? Or would you like us to fix or minimize the risk? And we're now giving the board options. We're involving them in our decisions, and we're educating them. And then we're going in and having an open discussion of what option or path we want to take.
It's fantastic. I think, Eric, now what we'll do is we'll kind of switch over to AI and machine learning. I know Alex has a few questions on that side.
Yeah. As organizations adopt AI faster, how should CISOs balance innovation with strong risk management?
So to me, AI is a tool.
Okay, true.
It's a tool to help us expand us, but it also has risks and exposures. And in many cases, companies just don't understand their risk. I mean, I take a bold statement on this. Any CEO that comes out and says 30% of my workforce is going to be replaced by AI and laid off over the next 2 years is naive, ill-informed, and has no right being a CEO. Because here's the reality. If you're telling 30% of your staff they're going to be laid off and they're going to be replaced by computers, my first question is, yeah, that's really going to motivate your team.
Of course.
You wonder why your employees are demotivated and don't want to work, and they don't want to show up to work, and they're hurting your business because you're basically telling them you don't care about them.
Of course.
You
Yeah,
basically
yeah.
tell them, we don't care, we're going to replace you. And that's just insane. I mean, where's your leadership skills to go in and say that? You should say, listen, we're going to take 30% of our workforce and we're going to make you worth twice as much
Yes.
by showing you how to embrace and utilize AI as a tool to enhance and grow the business.
Yep.
The other thing with AI is we need to go in and explain what the real risks are. The real risks here are you're using AI and you're feeding AI with critical data in your organization. You're putting
Correct.
classified information into these AI models, and then you're letting them go in and populate the public AI models. We go in and we do AI penetration testing where we'll go and ask very specific questions. I'm able to get specific details about the company, the CEO, and the financials because they're not protecting the data within the AI models. They're not going in and limiting and controlling what data goes public and what data other people have access to. And then you also get into this big issue of plagiarism and contract breach. If I'm going in and a company is paying me $1 million to go in and generate documentation for them, generate information for them, and it's supposed to take 500 hours. And now one of my employees goes in and says, take one of our competitors' documentation and produce something similar. You're technically not violating copyrights by doing that because you're generating a unique image, but now you're basically delivering a contract in 10 hours instead of 400 hours. Is that ethically sound? Is that ethically legit? Or are you going to have legal issues where now the company is going to fine you contractually in breach because you didn't do what you said? You went in and basically cut corners with AI. Is that valid or not? Those are the discussions that CISOs need to start having with their executive team. Or are we using AI in a moral and ethical manner? Are we actually delivering it correctly? And are we putting our company and employees at risk? And in my opinion, most companies are not ready to roll out AI.
Yeah,
They're
true.
basically just rushing it without understanding it, without knowing it, without controlling it. What if you just put it on hold or slow down the rollout and deployment until we really understood the risks, understood the exposure, and we're now doing it in a secure, legal, ethical, and moral manner? And most companies are just not educated enough to make those decisions
I
today.
agree. Yeah. You know what's funny? I went to an event a couple of weeks ago where someone from the public institutions were there, and she was telling 3 questions. Do we need an AI? Is something that could help us, or is just a marketing? And that was those questions were for me like, yeah, very good to be addressed. But you know, most of the execs they don't understand what's this AI, how it's doing, if there are risks over there, and what are those risks. And if a CISO is coming, again, some knows how to explain, some not. Or some will say, yeah, if the CEO says that, we'll do as he says. But not all the time is good. I mean, we have to be careful, whatever. If we don't have multiple measures in place, like DLP, because now we can put in place DLP for AI, we can put other tools for AI as well, like boundaries or guardrails. But people does not understand this. It's just, okay, I have heard the last technology is AI, but you know, we don't know what will happen over there.
No, you nailed it. I told you I sort of have certain principles that guide my life
Yeah,
and guide how I look at a system. The one I told you, let data drive decisions, not emotions. So do you have accurate data when it comes to AI? My second rule that I live my life on is smart people know the right answers. Brilliant people ask the right questions. So
yeah,
are we
correct.
going in and asking questions about AI to our executives and to our boards? And one of the big ones is, what is the problem we're trying to solve? Are we really trying to solve a problem here? Or is it just a cool term that we're pushing out without
Good
really
question.
understanding it? Because I
Yeah,
think in a lot of cases, all of a sudden, AI just came on force as this coolest tool that sort of was cool. Yeah, it's great that you can go into AI and ask it educated questions and things like that. But does your organization really have a problem? is there really an issue that AI is going to make it better and more efficient? Or is it really a bigger threat? Because you're looking at now attackers are using AI to basically bypass all of our security controls and create unique customized attacks. If you remember phishing used to be very generic. And we would go in and
Not
tell
anymore.
people, look at the URL, right? Look at the email it's coming from, make sure the domain name, look for spelling errors, look for things like that, because the phishing attacks were pretty dumb because they did the same attack for every single person. Now with AI and all these agents, they can create millions of agents and create a customized attack just for you. They can train the AI phishing tool on your data because it's out there, on your information, and say, I want you to create a customized attack for Eric that looks legit, acts legit, behaves legit, is tied to his schedule because you can access his calendar, and there's almost a guarantee that Eric's going to click on it. Because the reality is, if the AI knows that Eric has a United flight at 5 p.m. today, and it sends me a text from United Airlines that says your flight has been delayed, and if you want to reschedule, there's a flight at 6 p.m. that's going to be a better option. Click on this link to reschedule your flight. What's the probability that I click on that? I mean, it's almost guaranteed because it looks legit, it acts legit. It's the exact same text messages I get from United Airlines on a regular basis when I travel, and it's coming from a generic number, which is exactly what United does. They use generic numbers to send me text all the time. Now, because they created such a customized attack, the probability of me clicking on it is guaranteed. So now, as CISOs, we need to go back and say, why are we allowing links and attachments in our emails? What if we filtered it out and we basically only allow text, where United would send me a text, and instead of giving me a link, it says, go to the United app and check your flight. Now I'm using a legitimate app that's on my device that I'm
dual authentication on it.
And we just remove the links and we remove the attachments, because this idea, we used to think about BYOD, bring your own device, and we would always want to separate out. Remember, we used to have two devices, two cell phones, one for business, one for work. Well, the reality is it's all merged together. Your life and your business are the same. And those are interacted. And if I can exploit vulnerabilities in your life, I can exploit vulnerabilities in your business. And world-class CISOs recognize and know this. But then here's the real thing. What if we go in, and I'm just going to say something crazy here. What if I go in and say, okay, I'm going to let my endpoint be compromised because all my critical data is on back-end servers. So if you go in and you compromise my endpoint device, it can't access the data. It can't access the information because it's all on back-end servers. And now I, as a CISO, use AI to defend and protect attacks. Because here's the reality. The two ways you're going to catch attackers, and it's so straightforward, but without AI, we can't do it. The two ways you compromise your critical data being exposed is with lateral movement, with pivot points, and with data exfiltration, the data leaving your organization. Those are the two number one triggers for catching attacks. Well, here's the problem. Without AI, me trying to manually go in and identify pivot points and lateral movement in the organization is almost impossible. Because think about all the servers, the matrix of servers that you have for lateral movement between the endpoint and your servers. You have about 4 or 5 different verticals or different zones, and there's probably 30 to 40 servers in each one. If you had to try to manually correlate all the data flows between each of those layers and look at for anomalies, it's almost impossible. AI, it's a piece of cake. AI can go in and monitor thousands upon thousands of lateral movements and create a baseline and be able to identify those anomalies quick and fast. So now if I, as a CISO, embrace AI to have it train on all the lateral movement and identify anomalies, I can now catch a compromise very quick and very fast before it ever gets to my critical data. And now I'm using AI to one up or be much more effective than the attackers. And same thing with data exfiltration. If I'm trying to look at all the data that's leaving our organization and create a normalized baseline and look for anomalies, it's impossible to do manually. It's just an overload of information. But what if I go in and I deploy 100 AI agents to look, correlate, and analyze that data? Now, when somebody's trying to exfiltrate data out, I catch it within seconds or minutes, and now I minimize the damage. So now an attacker gets 100 records instead of 100 million records because I've embraced AI correctly. So we need to go in and look at how the attacker is exploiting us. And then as a CISO, focus AI on very strategic, focused areas to catch compromised systems, use it as almost an augmentation of threat hunting, and minimize or control the loss of data to our organization when our databases get compromised.
Okay, that's interesting thing. What emerging AI-related threats do you believe CISO should prioritize preparing for the next 3-5 years?
The big thing, once again, is looking at AI as a tool. It's not a replacement.
Yeah.
It's not going to replace your security team. It's not going to replace your staff, and just changing how we view it. The next thing over the next 5 years, as I said, is what are the current hard problems we have in cybersecurity today that we can't currently solve? What are those hard, difficult problems that we can't currently solve, whether it's compromise of the endpoint, whether it's loss of data, whether it's compromised systems that we can't detect, and then go in and say, how can AI help us solve these difficult problems? How can AI go in and help us solve problems that we can't currently solve today? And now we're using AI as a solution, as opposed to just deploying AI without really understanding or knowing how it works or how it operates.
Okay. I think we covered most of the AI topic. We'll jump to the zero trust and identity and cloud. Aaron, would you like to?
So, as we know, zero trust is definitely a multi-year journey. What are the kind of the highest impact milestones CISOs can achieve in the next 12 to 18 months?
First is, once again, I'm a big fan of going back to definitions. You're going back to defining what it is when we say zero trust. So what is zero trust? And once again, I love doing this with clients and companies, saying, give me a one-sentence definition of zero trust. And so many people can't do it. Well, if you can't define what something is, how are you going to be able to solve it? So to me, zero trust is, how do we go in and isolate all of our components, so if one component gets compromised, it can't impact any of the other components. So we go in and let's just break it down. Zero trust for our smartphones. That's an endpoint that most people have and most people go. So how can we use zero trust on these devices? First, let's try to go in and reduce the problem. Let's try to go in and shrink the attack vectors. So the first reality is, with our smartphones, we have way too many apps that have way too much access that we're not using. I just ask you, both of you, and I ask our listeners, how many apps do you have on your phone that have access to your location or access to your microphone or camera or pictures that you haven't used in 45 days? That are just sitting there representing a risk to you, that if you just deleted them off your device, you could greatly reduce the attack vector and greatly reduce the attack surface on your system. So to me, the first step in zero trust is, let's remove the attack. Let's reduce the attack surface. Let's go in and start deleting apps that we're not using. Because what if your device now has 15 apps instead of 100? And what if we then go in and those apps, we go in and remove access to your location server. We remove access to your camera or your microphone. Now, all of a sudden, our zero trust becomes a lot easier, because now we've reduced the attack surface and making it much harder or much difficult for somebody to actually get access to it. Then what if we start using, one of the techniques out there that so many people are not using is sandboxing. What if I go in and the two apps right now that create the greatest point of exposure is email and web browsers. Those are pretty much the two ways. If your phone's going to get targeted, your smartphone's going to get targeted, it's going to be because somebody sends a link that has embedded code, or they send an attachment that has malware embedded in it, and yet you clicking it is one step to compromise your system and reduce that attack surface. So let's go in and just filter out embedded links. Or what if we won our email our email clients and our web browsers in separate, isolated virtual machines or sandbox on our smartphone? Now, all of a sudden, if we click on a link and we get compromised, it's contained and controlled, and it can't spread anywhere else in the organization. And what if we go in and we don't allow users to download free apps on our device? What if we go in and we give them a hardened image that they download and they can't modify or change it? So we're not allowing free apps anymore, because free is not free. You know the game. Free is you're giving your data as a point. So what if we do a complete paradigm shift of how we think, act, and control our smartphones, and we actually go in and change the entire paradigm, where the users no longer are able to go in and just download free apps, infect our system, and cause compromises, and we're now containing and controlling it. And then if we get to our tablets or our laptops or our computers and we start doing similar things, what if we do hardened images where users can't modify or change the image? What if we go in and have sandboxing for all apps? So now if an app gets compromised, the computer is not compromised, just an isolated sandbox, and now it can't spread across the network. What if when we go in and we connect to our servers, we're actually going in and going through filtering where we only allow certain data flows? So this goes back to, what if I'm using AI to only allow our clients to access certain data or certain servers or certain information, and we're now doing anomaly detection on steroids to only allow, control, and restrict? What could happen and what could occur? And then what if we do that with our applications, where we start going and controlling where they're only allowed to ask certain queries? What if we go back to pre-canned queries, where now your systems, your middleware servers, are only allowed to ask very specific, very limited queries to your database? And what if we go in and actually put our keys on a separate server? Right now, one of the biggest problems with databases being compromised is they're all encrypted with the same key, and the key resides on the server.
Yeah.
Did we ever go back and ask ourselves a question? How does an attacker break in to a database and able to download 50 million records when those records were supposedly encrypted? When those records were supposedly encrypted, if encryption was done correctly and a user breaks into a database, they should get one record, not 50 million. The problem is we're storing our key plain text on the system, and we're using the same key for every single tuple in that database. So now if somebody gets the key, they break it in. What if we store all of our keys on a separate server and we use data diode? So it's a one-way connection, and you have to utilize a separate key. So now when an attacker breaks into that server using zero trust, they could only make a query for one key. They have to get authenticated with two-factor authentication, which the attacker doesn't have. And now we're going in and doing true zero trust, because now if our database gets compromised, they can't get the keys, they can't get the data, and they can't exfiltrate 50 million records. So it's really just rethinking the model, saying, okay, let's allow or do an assumption that our device gets compromised, but controlling and minimizing access. So if a device does get compromised, it can't do damage to any other device, and it can't access our data or cause harm or damage.
So in a multi-cloud environment, what do you see as the one identity related capability or policy every organization should standardize first?
It should really be going in and focusing in on identity management, really controlling and managing who a user is and what access they really have. And in a lot of cases, we go in and we have end users, and we're not understanding what their identity is, what access they need, and they have way too much access to do their jobs. This is one of the craziest thing I've seen. If you go back 20, 25 years ago, one of the biggest issues was controlling and managing access. I remember in 2005, 2005, when I would go in and do security assessments for companies, and I would go in and ask how many people have administrative access to the servers. And it would be like 50 people.
Whoa.
And I'd be like, why in the world does 50 people need access? And we'd reduce it down to 4 or 5 people.
Exactly.
Then I remember going in and saying, how many people have local admin access to their laptop or their desktop? And it'll be like, oh, everybody does.
What?
Everybody's logging in. And then over the last, from 2005 to 2015 to 2020, we fixed that. We went in and really controlled and managed identity. So now only 4 or 5 people had administrative access to all of our different systems, and nobody logged in as admin. We were containing and controlling the problem. Today, I want to ask you a question for your listeners out there. How many of you are currently watching or listening to this podcast and you're logged in as administrator to your device? You're logged in as a privileged user. My bet is it's a large number because we've just got so accustomed to doing that. And what if we just logged in as a regular, normal user? And then my question for every one of you is, how many people, if you look at all your servers in your organization, how many people currently have administrative access to those servers or systems at some level? I bet you it's over 100 because we do these assessments all the time. So it's like we've forgotten the basics of controlling and managing identities and controlling and managing access to the information. And then the other big one that all CISOs need to really get aggressive on and focus on is data classification.
Yeah.
What is your critical data? How is it labeled? How is it accessed? Once again, I remember we used to solve this problem where we would have separate servers with separate access that only certain number of people could access based on their job. We did role-based security or access-based security. We classified our data and we only allowed certain people to have access to certain information. It seemed like that going out the door. Today, in the last 18 to 24 months, when somebody gets access to an organization, they could access all the data. There's no limited, there's no data classification. And I ask people, do you really need access to that data to do your job? And the answer is no, but we're still allowing it. So going
do you think AI could help with the data classification? Because I know some of that work on the back end with data classification is very time consuming and resource intensive.
Yeah, I think AI can help out with all those areas. So for example, what if when we hired somebody, we gave them a certain job title? So we gave them a job title of they're an accountant or they're a senior analyst or they're an HR specialist. And then we went in and we said, what is the data that an HR specialist needs to do their job? What is the data that an accountant needs to do their job? What is the access that somebody who works in IT as a junior admin needs to do their job? And then we give that to AI, and AI checks all 3,000 employees to make sure they only have access to that data. And then what if I go in and I tell AI, this data is this classification and this data is this classification, and I just define it once. And then I tell AI, you go out there and enforce this policy and enforce and make sure that we're labeling the data, we're putting it on separate directories, and we're only allowing the people that need it to do their job to access to it. That task right there is impossible to do manually. There's no way a human can do it. But guess what? AI can do it masterfully. And especially with agentic AI, where you can now create 100 people. I can't go in financially with a budget and hire 1,000 security engineers. If you look at a security engineer makes $200K a year, and I needed 1,000 of them
to just do data classification.
$20 million budget. There's no way I can do that. But guess what? I can hire 1,000 agents that aren't really costing me anything, and it can go out and do that same exact job, probably even better than humans, because AI doesn't make mistakes. It does what you tell it to do. AI doesn't need to sleep. AI doesn't go in and get tired and exhausted. AI doesn't go in and forget to show up to work. The nice thing about AI is it's predictable and it does the same thing over and over again, doesn't deviate, doesn't modify, which is exactly what we want for redundant tasks that we do over and over again. Where we want humans is on creativity.
Yep.
Computers can't think original thoughts. Computers can't have emotions. Computers can't be creative. So what if we go in and we now give the task that only humans can do to humans, and we give the tasks that only computers can do to AI or computers? Now, all of a sudden, we are greatly enhancing our workforce. We're not burning out our staff by doing things that AI could do, and now we're making them smarter, better, and more efficient.
Beautifully said. So let's kind of jump into supply chain a little bit. What did you see are the most effective actions organizations can take today to reduce supply chain and third-party risk?
First is recognizing that some access, some activity, and some of your applications shouldn't be outsourced to third parties. So going back to a risk assessment, look at all your business processes, look at all of your critical data and information, and saying what should be done in-house and what should be outsourced with supply chain. I tell you, in the last month, my life has gotten so busy because we're now going in, and the number one question we're getting from companies, what server should be on-prem right now? Because after both the AWS outage and the Microsoft outage, they're now going in and saying, wait a second, maybe we shouldn't outsource all of our data to third parties. Maybe we shouldn't use supply chain for everything. Because I had clients of mine, 100% of their servers were outsourced to a third party.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that because we've definitely talked to several CISOs who it's 100% cloud-based. Almost everything.
And they just never thought about, I mean, that's a third-party risk on steroids. I mean, that's the biggest third-party risk. And now they're asking, should maybe some of these servers be on-prem?
Yeah,
should maybe we have a small data center and we actually host things on site instead of outsourcing it? So when it comes to supply chain, what is really the risk of your data and business processes? And should it be 100% outsourced to third parties? And then going back to our zero trust question, what access should they really have? If we go back and look at SolarWinds, that was insanity. Why are we allowing a third party to bypass all of our security controls, sit on our internal network, and have access to all of our data, all of our systems, and all of our servers? When you go back and look at it from a risk-based question, no company would ever say that's a good thing. But the problem is we're not asking questions, we're not looking at risk, and we're just looking at the value and benefit. What is the value and benefit? What is the increase? SolarWinds had a ton of value and benefit, but they never asked the second question. And the second question is, what is the risk or exposure to your organization? And is the benefit worth the risk? I'm a practical security guy. I'm not the one that says, no, 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 no. I know a lot of times when people find out what I do for a living, or I come into companies and I'm like, oh, I'm the cyber guy or I'm the CISO. They all go, oh, you're going to tell us what we can't do. You're going to basically make our life more difficult. And my answer is no. I'm going to ask you questions and I'm going to make you an educated consumer. And it's real simple. When I go in and look at any problem or anybody asks, Eric, can I do this? Can I do this in the name of security? I ask them three questions. What is the value or benefit? What value or benefit are you getting from doing this? Second question, what are the risks? What are the risks and exposure by doing this? And then my third question is, are the benefits worth the risk? Is it worth the risk of doing this versus the value and benefit you get? And I think a lot of companies, when they're looking to outsourcing, supply chain, and cloud, in many cases, they don't even really know what the benefit is. Like I had one client go in, I said, what is the benefit of getting rid of your internal servers, your internal data center, and putting all of them on cloud? What is the value or benefit? And they're like, I don't really know. It's just something everyone's doing, right? All the cool kids are smoking, so I should smoke. And they're not really.
I'm assuming the pitch would have to be a cost.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The migration and all those. They're just not asking these basic fundamental questions. What is the value and benefit? What is the risk? And is the value worth the risk? And I think if we start asking those questions, we're going to realize that outsourcing cloud and supply chain is maybe good for 30% of your business, but not 100%.
So let's do a quick switch over. Alex, I know, has a few questions on incident response and cyber insurance.
Yep. From your experience, what are the most gaps you still see in modern incident response plans?
The biggest one is not testing those incident response plans and doing tabletop exercises and realizing there's fundamental flaws in it. I can't tell you how many times we have companies where they're like, oh, Eric, we have incident response plans. We have disaster recovery plans. We hired somebody to write this amazing incident response plan. And then what happens? An incident occurs. They go in to execute the plan and the plan fails.
Indeed.
Because they never tested it. They never went in and said,
I agree on that.
Can it recover? Can it do that? And I'll tell you right now, this is another area I do a lot with, and it's crazy. We go in and companies hire us to test their incident response plan and do tabletop exercises. And I will tell you a scary number. In the last 6 months, 93% of them failed.
Wow.
93% of them did not pass a basic tabletop exercise, which means if it was a real incident, they would have been basically in a whole lot of trouble. And the incident response plan did not work the way it was advertised. So we just have to go in and just start testing, verifying, validating to make sure they really work and to fix them before you have a real problem.
Eric, what do you think that the main reason is for that?
It's just lack of awareness of the business processes and how they really work. We go in a lot of cases, and most of our incident response plans are either done just by the business unit and IT is not involved, or is done by IT and the business unit is not involved. The only way you're going to build out an effective incident response plan, if I get the business owner, the business unit, and IT and security in the same room, and they actually work together. They actually go in and the business unit knows how the process works and IT knows the tactical back end. And unless those two pieces come together and we start working and cooperating, you're going to have a plan that looks good to one side, but fails on the other side.
It reminds me about banking sector when I was CISO over there and I was doing the first simulation with a business, first with IT, of course, and then with the business, because this is how it goes. You have to test the environment or environments. It depends how many you have. And then you have to test the applications, which is part of the business side. And over there, it comes together with IT again. First, the first phase is IT only. The second phase is IT plus business. In case if business does not have access to something, it's because IT didn't done correctly. One of the first phase. And then it comes like a third phase. It's not the third phase. It's happening in the second phase to commute to the back to the HQ. Because its HQ is in the air. This is how it goes. I know because I went through my first test a long time ago, of course, around 7 years ago. And I remember how those were. And the second one was different. But of course, in the end is the first one when you try your best to everything work properly, to not have any small issue, to register every timing, and then to conclude with a final report to everyone, IT, business, and CEO.
Exactly.
So yeah, I totally understand over there, Eric, and I know how it works. I know how hard it is, how time-consuming it is, because that's the whole point over there.
It seems like that would be the biggest issue. It's resources.
Yeah.
I agree. They have limited resources. Their engineers are worrying about alerts, doing incident response, and they're busy. So then you're trying to pull people out of staff you don't have because you have limited resources and to do something that you just can't do.
And once again, not to keep looping back, but it seems like you just can't get away with it, this is one where agentic AI can help you. Because guess what? People get sick. People get tired.
Yeah.
People go on vacation. People win the lottery. People tell their bosses to go, you know what, themselves, and they're not available. So you go in and you say, I need 8 people to recover this.
Yep.
And people are not there, not available, and you only have 3 out of 8, and you're in trouble. What if instead of 8 humans, I need 3 humans and 10 AI agents to be able to recover this? Because once again, going in, checking, verifying backups doesn't need to be done by a human. It can be done by a computer because it's repeatable. It doesn't require original thought, and it doesn't require somebody to be creative. So what if in our incident response plan, we're now saying 80% of our incident response plan is automated by agentic AI and only 20% has to be done by humans? We're now making this problem a lot quicker, a lot faster, and a lot easier.
And segment those agentic AI, make sure they don't have access to any public information, you know, and then you're not worried about the security of those running.
Yeah.
And that's the other cool thing is I can control AI. I can go in and program it. You can only do this.
Yeah.
And AI is not going to second guess me. AI isn't going to make a mistake. And AI isn't going to try to cut corners. I can go in and tell a human, this is how you do their job. And they could skip a step. They could decide they have a better way of doing it. They could decide to just not do it that way. So while humans are great, humans are much more prone to errors and overthinking, where AI doesn't have those issues or challenges.
Okay, interesting.
You also have a cyber insurance question, I think you said too.
Yeah, indeed. With cyber insurance becoming more restrictive, because this is what I'm looking, and this is what I see more often, and complex. What should CISOs focus on over the next 12 months to maintain federal coverage?
The first one is to work closely with whoever in your business is actually responsible for the insurance policy and reading the actual policy.
Yeah.
Actually reading what is required to pay out. It's insurance companies are brilliant on putting loopholes in that. I'll give you one in the real world. When humans go in and get an insurance policy, one of the questions you get asked is, do you smoke? And most people are thinking cigarettes, are thinking on a regular basis, and they check, no, I do not smoke. I do. And I just saw this in a case. They check the box, they do not smoke. But guess what? Twice a year, when they go in and have their birthday and their anniversary, they smoke a cigar.
Oh, yeah.
And they go in and smoke a cigar. And there was a case where somebody passed away, and on their social media, which is a whole nother topic we could spend an hour on their social media, there was a picture of them smoking a cigar. It was publicly available. The insurance underwriter found it and said, we're not paying the 10 million policy because you lied to us. And guess what? They're right, unfortunately. And they didn't have to pay the policy because that person checked a box and they falsified information. Now, you could argue and debate the legitimacy of it, but that's what's happening in cyber insurance is they're going in and they're asking. So the person who's signing the policy for the company, they ask IT a simple question. Are we patching our servers? Do we patch our servers on a regular basis? And IT says, yes, of course we are. What they don't realize is the policy that they're signing says, are you patching all servers within a 60-day window? And now they have a breach, and the insurance company underwriters come in and they find that there was a server in the data center that's running. It's not plugged into anything, and it hasn't been patched for 3 years. And they're now going in and saying, we're not paying your policy because you lied to us. You said that all servers are 100% patched, and we found a server that's not all. And therefore, because you lied to us, we're not paying out the policy. And this types of craziness is happening all the time. So we as CISOs need to go in and read the policy and go back and go, whoa, whoa, whoa.
Oh my God.
All policies, all servers are not patched. We cannot sign that. We can go in and say all critical servers are patched, and we can change the wording so we're adhering to it within our company. But we're going in and seeing this all the time where the insurance companies are just not paying out. And then companies are put in a really bad, hard place because they're not doing what they thought they were doing.
Yeah.
So it is 12:55. We only got 5 minutes left, Eric. So let's do a quick lightning round to kind of finish this off, if that's okay.
Yeah, let's
Alex,
do it. I
I'll
love
do the lightning round. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Okay. So first question. One thing every CISO should start doing tomorrow to prepare for 2030.
Exercise, eat healthy, and drink a gallon of water a day, because I'm seeing so many CISOs are overdoing their health. They're in terrible shape and they're getting illnesses. They're missing work and they're unfortunately dying and passing away. I buried 5 CISOs this year who were 55 years old because they put work before their health. So you can't be effective if you're not healthy, if you're not exercising, if you're not eating correctly.
Good
Question number
advice.
2. One common practice many CISOs should consider stopping or rethinking.
Is spending too much time with technical folks, spending too much time hanging out and thinking like a security engineer. You should, in evenings, be going to dinner with other chief officers. You should be spending the weekend with chief officers. 60% of your time in the office should be sitting with the chief officers, not sitting with the security engineers.
And the last question, the single most important leadership habit for future ready CISOs.
Is to go in and read business books on a regular basis. Is to go in and think and act like a business executive, read business books, and to actually look at financial statements on a weekly and monthly basis.
Fantastic. Alex, do you have any questions? I know we only got 4 minutes left, but
I have a closing question. Eric, please leave the audience with simple 5-item checklist they can begin implementing in the next 30 days to move their program closer to 2030 readiness.
First practice is meeting with every chief officer, the top 5, CEO, COO, CFO, chief legal counsel, meeting with those 4 on a weekly basis.
Okay.
So you should have at least a 15, 20-minute meeting with the CEO every week, with the COO every week. Second practice, ask better questions. Don't go in with answers. I often joke there's a reason why the creators gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. Maybe we should be listening more than we're talking. So go in and ask them a question. How can I help you? How can I go in and better support you from an information security perspective? Third one, have a risk posture in your organization that everybody agrees to. What is your risk tolerance level? What risks are we willing to accept? And what risk are we not willing to accept? And then push that down. Fourth practice, present at every board meeting. The CISO shouldn't be presenting once a year at a board meeting. If you have monthly board meetings, they should present at every one. If you have quarterly board meetings, you should be presenting at every one, and focus on my 3 slides. And then the 5th one is go in and think about the finances. What could happen? What is the likelihood of occurring, cost of it occurs, and cost to fix? Security should always be articulated in financial loss and financial benefit to the organization, and focus on how can we treat how we can treat cyber as a business enabler to allow the company to have better revenue and better profitability.
Interesting.
so I'd like to finish off, Eric, if you give us a little bit about your contact information if people want to reach you, to learn more about what you do and any promotional stuff we want to talk about in the future. We would love to hear it.
Sure. So it's real easy. Dr. Eric Cole, Dr. ERIC COLE. That's how I am on all social media. So whether you're an IG person, a YouTube person, or a Facebook or a LinkedIn, I give away a lot of ton free information. I believe giving back at this point in my life. I'm all about contribution. I give away a ton of free information. drericcole.com is my website. If you want to find out more about my services from a company, secure-anchor.com. I also have my weekly podcast, Life of a CISO, where you can go in and get a lot of free information. And then if you want to supercharge your career, I also have a paid CISO certification where you can do monthly group coaching calls with me, where I can coach you and help you become a world-class CISO.
Fantastic. Eric, thank you so much for your time today. This was great speaking with you. Alex, thank you so much for joining too.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure, my friends. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Eric, what I'm going to do is I'll shut down, but if you just want to stay on for a second, we'll be right then.
Okay.